Hey, what's up? Flintoid here with another Disc Priest beta video. So, this video is going to be to explain all of the legendaries that Disc Priests have, how to get them, and how effective they are. So I've rated the legendaries on a scale of A to C, so A being the best, C being the worst. So, if you haven't heard, in Legion, you acquire legendaries through kind of like a random drop reward system. So I got my legendaries, the legitimate ones, through this Grand Challenger's bounty, which you get for doing Mythic Dungeons once a week. You just click on it, and then another legendary I got from just a random cache for doing like a heroic dungeon or something. So I got my legendaries through drops, but I hear that you can also get the legendaries through like any world quests. It's just randomly get, or mobs maybe. So legendaries for Disc Priest, if you open up your adventure guide, go to loot, legendaries, and then you can pick your class and whatnot. But so basically these are the 8 main legendaries for Disc Priest, with one exception. There's another one in Holy that you can use. It's a wrist. We'll get to that in a second, but so most of the legendaries are pretty good. All of them are useful, so don't be upset if you get any of them. The item level associated with them is way higher than anything you're ever going to find. Even Mythic Raid, even Mythic Raid gear stops at, I believe it's 890 or 885. So don't be upset if you get any of them, but there are definitely some that are way stronger than others. So I'm going to go over that today. Their usefulness, the kind of like the more advanced techniques you can use them for, some questions you might have I can answer. So we're going to start. There's a person in Dalaran, just for beta only, that sells you all the legendaries. So I bought all the legendaries and tested them all. So here they are, all 9 of them. So it shows 8 up here, but there's actually another one that you can use, like I said before. So I rated them on an A to C scale. So these are my A legendaries, these are my B legendaries, and these are my C legendaries, and I'm going to explain why in a second. So I'm going to start down here to the C legendaries and explain why. So the worst one, in my opinion, to get is these Norgannon's Foresight. So now mainly during this video I'm going to explain why the ability that's on them, so the equip effect on them, is either really good or really bad. There's some of these legendaries that are really good for their stats. For example, these stats aren't terrible, but God, the equipability is. So your instacast spells have a chance to trigger Foresight, making your next non-instacast spell castable while moving. So this sounds great. It sounds like, oh, I can cast a spell, it's just a lot of like mobility adds to my kit, right? But then you look at your spell book, and you're like, well, Penance I can cast while moving. Power Word Shield, Plea. The only abilities it really benefits is Power Word Radiance and Schism. I guess mine, it's just Shadow Mend a little bit too, but it feels really poor. If you don't have 1 second to cast a move, I don't know. It's really poor. It only procs in combat, which seems counterintuitive, but it doesn't work if you're just like running around. I don't know. It's nothing that you can depend on. It's random. So that's why I think it's the worst legendary. It's random. I don't know. It might be like a quality of life buff, but when it happens, it just catches you off guard. You don't plan on it, and really in healing, a lot of stuff you don't plan on, it ends up falling flat on its face. So the next one I would say would be Chord of Maeve, I think. So Smite has a 30% chance to reset the remaining cooldown of Penance. So again, this sounds appealing, but I tested it out. So basically how the math works is after 2 smites, there's a 51% chance that your penance is going to be reset. So after 2 smites, so we're going to equip this, right? And I'll show you. So I'll show you on like this dummy here. After 2 smites, let me penance first. Penance. After 2 smites, so 1, 2, alright, this one's 3. Yep, that didn't proc. 4, okay, that one reset, but it was too low. So we're going to try again. 1, okay, that one reset. But then, like, it's just super clunky because, yeah, that definitely helped, right? But then I had to stop my smite cast because I'm already anticipating pushing smite again. So really, I like, realistically, you're going to cast smite a minimum of 2 times in order to increase your DPS. And then the only thing you're rotating between is smite and penance. And it just feels super awkward. Penance is already on a really low cooldown. Like, by the time you channel the entire penance, it's only got, you know, 6-7 seconds left. And then smite just, I don't know, it just, randomness in your rotation like this is going to kind of kick you in the butt. It just adds an element that Disc Priest already has to pay attention to so much. To like add this to the mix is, I don't know, it's not that good. Not that good. Alright, moving on. This looks really good at the start, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, but Plea increases your haste by 1% for each target with your atonement for 5 seconds. So the Plea is generally an inefficient spell to cast. It's pretty much good for applying atonement to like one target at the end of your Light's Wrath or on the last bolt as penance is hitting the target. So you're really gonna get, what really kills this, because it's really seldom in a raid that you're going to, in a raid setting, that you're gonna have like 15 atonement stacks and then hit Plea for that 15%, which that's really good, but then 5 seconds is not long at all. And actually, what really sucks, but I'll show you, the buff doesn't, it starts as soon as Plea's cast. So that means by the time the GCD's up on Plea, which will be a minimum if you're haste capped, 1 second. So, and if you're haste capped, this legendary won't benefit you at all because it's increasing your haste, right? So let's say that at, I don't know, it's a 1.5 second GCD at 0 haste.
I don't have a talk.
It increases your haste by 1% each. So, like, by the time it's expired, you've only got 3.5 seconds on your of your haste buff left. Like 3.5 seconds is only enough to cast 2 more moves. So you've got basically a haste buff for 2 more moves, which is really not that good considering that Plea is an inefficient spell anyway, and to like put Plea into your rotation is just really bad. It's just not an efficient legendary because of the time. Honestly, if this atonement time was like 10 seconds or 15 seconds, I would say that this legendary would be something to look at. I would consider putting, like, if I had this legendary and Plea, I would consider weaving Plea into my rotation somehow. But an atonement for 5 seconds is 2 spells, which is, that's just not very good. Not very good. It's a quality of life, again, kind of similar to these two things, where if it happens, it's great. Like, passively getting that extra haste percentage is cool, but to, like, count on it is just not very good. Alright, next we're going to talk about this kind of weird legendary that I was talking about, the Holy Priest legendary. So, I don't think this was intended, which is kind of cool, but Holy has a legendary where when your health is above 75%, the cast time of your heal, prayer of healing, and smite is reduced by 15%. So, this, I definitely don't think this was intended for disc. So if I equip it, let's unequip it first. My smite right now is on a 1.29 cast time, right? If I equip this, it drops down to 1.08, which is really close to GCD cap. So right now, the smite is actually behind the GCD cap. But let's say I increase my haste to GCD cap. It's perfect. Smite and my GCD cap have a 1-to-1 ratio. So right now, just casting smite, I'm doing like 120k damage-ish. Yeah. But that's with haste cap. So this legendary is actually pretty decent because it's pretty decent actually until you hit your smite cast time of 1 second. After you hit your smite cast time of 1 second, you're pretty much not going to be getting any more additional benefit from this legendary, because after it hits 1 second or lower, at no point in time will the smite actually increase your damage, your throughput. It's the max it will do at 1 second. So this legendary is really good until you get 20% haste, I believe is what it is. As soon as you get above 20% haste, this legendary is still pretty good, but that's when its diminishing value starts showing. So there's that. I think it's pretty good. If I got it, I would definitely use it, even though it's a Holy Priest one. So there's that. And you can use it for Holy too if you want to switch specs, so there's a little added utility. So that's why I put it B rank, like the lowest on the B rank scale, because it is good. It's definitely looking at, but there's better legendaries. So this one, Power Word Shield reduces the remaining cooldown of pain suppression by 4 seconds. So let's find this bad boy. So this is this one here. So I did the math, and it's, if you casted Power Word Shield on cooldown with 20% haste, it reduces the cooldown of Power Word Shield, which right now mine's at 4 minutes because I don't have the Light's Wrath trait yet. It will reduce the cooldown by I think it's a minute 36 or a minute 26 seconds. So essentially it will put this at a 2-minute 30-second cooldown, which is pretty good considering pain suppression is the best external cooldown in the game. That someone, like, let's say I give it to a tank, right? Short of like the Holy Priests bring you back to life thing. But yeah, so 2.5-minute cooldown if you keep Power Word Shield on cooldown. I'm gonna say most people won't be like extremely efficient about it, and it'll probably in the end it'll reduce this cooldown of pain suppression by like about a minute for average players. But then you've got your trait in your weapon tree, which reduces it by another 30 seconds. So I would say really, really efficient players will get pain suppression on about a 2-minute, 10-second cooldown. And then like average players to like people, you know, I'd say that they're going to be floating a little under 3, maybe like 240 for this. Which is really good considering how strong it is. However, I mean, you don't always need it in like a dungeon or PvP setting. It's really nice, but so that's why I give it like middle of the pack. So it's really good, not like the greatest, but definitely not the worst legendary. So next we have this ring. So when your penance damages an enemy, it also heals allies affected in your Power Word barrier. So I did some significant testing with this. Because first I thought the ring was broken as all hell. I thought all damage transferred would transfer into healing, which would be nuts. You're looking at, oh man, like you drop your barrier and catch 20 people in a raid in that, like you're looking at like 2.5 to 3 million healing. And then I was like, well, what if it's only atonement? So I actually did some testing. I can't do it in here, but I basically damaged myself a bunch, and then threw down my barrier and penanced. And what it did was it counted everyone within the barrier as atonement. So basically, my penance would act as everyone in the barrier had atonement on them, which was decent, I guess. I did the math. It adds about like 900k healing. It's like 7 to 900k healing at 860 item level, which is decent. It's a really nice burst. I would say it would be really similar to something like Revival, but much less. I'd say it'd be like half a Revival or a third of a Revival. And it's really nice because Barrier already reduces the damage incoming, so it's just a really nice raid cooldown. I think it's really strong. If like everyone's taking a bunch of ticking damage and people can be stacked, I think in a raid setting you'll probably get, oh, could you imagine something like Gorfiend? Like, oh my god, you would just heal for so much with one penance. Yeah. So that's why I place it in the B category. It's situational, because you need to have barrier up, but it has potential to do just extreme healing. So now we're going to move on to the A category. So there might be some disagreements and replacements in here, but I think generally these are going to be extremely useful in most cases, be it dungeons, be it raiding, some of them in root and PvP. And I'll explain why. I've done pretty good testing with most of them too. So this one, this necklace, I say that I've done the most testing with because I was skeptical. And it's really weird how it reads. So it says, after not taking any damage for 5 seconds, you gain an absorb shield for 15% of your maximum health for 30 seconds. This does not occur once every 30. This effect may occur once every 30 seconds. So basically, I'm going to equip it, and it's going to do a little countdown. 5 seconds. Okay, I haven't taken any damage. So right here, it's counting down. 25, 24, 23. So this shield, no matter how much damage it takes, is going to refresh in 30 seconds. So let's say that I take, I don't know, this shield hits 100k. In 10 seconds, this shield is going to refresh for this entire 300k bubble, so long as I don't take damage within that 5 seconds. So what'll happen is, as soon as I stop taking damage, let's say it hits 1, and here, I just click off it. So let's say it hits 1, and I'm still taking damage. It will count to 5, and once I stop taking damage, it will reapply this 300k shield, which is actually extremely good. Like, I didn't think of it, think it would be that good, but I did some math, and let's say you have a fight that lasts 6 minutes long, a typical fight. So 6 minutes times 30 seconds times 300k. Whoops, that is wrong. So 300k times 6 minutes, so it will proc 12 times, right? So that's 3.6 million healing passively. No, that's optimal, right? So if you're taking damage, it's not going to proc for 5 more seconds. So I'd say a good rule of thumb is that for every minute, you'll heal probably about 500k healing with this shield, which is really strong. I'd say in a fight, that's just 500k healing you didn't have to do on yourself, So it's a nice passive buff. You never have to think about it, and it still supplements your healing a shit ton. Alright, so let's move on to these gloves. So these gloves, once you get up here, it's really hard to distinguish what the best legendary is. But these gloves, at first look, I thought they were shit. When Penance deals damage, the duration of atonement on yourself is increased by 2 seconds. And when your Penance heals, the duration of atonement on your target is increased by 2 seconds. So if I equip these gloves, what that means is that if I apply atonement on myself, it's going to increase the amount of time that atonement is on me passively. Now at first I thought this would be shit, and then I equipped it, and if you pay really close attention to the number of seconds, it's actually per bolt that comes out. So it's not 2 seconds for penance total. It's actually 6 seconds because it's 3 bolts, right? 1, 2, 3, and it jumped up by 6 seconds on the atonement, which is crazy. And then you can do fun stuff like, I tested out castigation, which fires an additional bolt. It actually works. So if I apply a penance on myself and then go, it will actually apply that extra bolt as an extra proc of these gloves, which is really important because it's just like these gloves will make it so you'll if you apply penance on yourself, it will take so long for that to fall off. So long. I didn't do the math, but so long as you keep penance on cooldown, you won't have to apply atonement on yourself for like maybe once a minute. Maybe it might even go endless. I think it's 1 second for every penance. So let's say you started at the initial one starts at 18. So it will take 18 penances before it will fall off that you'll cast, which is nuts because penance is on what, a 9-second cooldown. 18 times 9 is 18 times 9, 3 minutes, a little under 3 minutes before this falls off. That's crazy. It's like 2 minutes 42 seconds. And this is just some quick math, but basically if you apply atonement to yourself and keep penance on cooldown, like you'll never have to apply atonement to yourself again. Like, these gloves are nuts. Absolutely nuts. That's so much. That's so good. And then I do not recommend this, but so the other half of it is whoops. So the other half of it is that when you apply penance, like when it heals, so I have to directly heal a target for this to work, which means I need to pick the Pentient. So penance may be cast on a friendly target, healing them for 290k. So it's actually a little bit of a buff compared to, let's say I took Schism, 290k versus 207k. I think it's, oh, what is that? That's like a 33% buff almost. Not quite, but anyway, so you have to pick the Pentient, and then it increases like atonement on this target, for example, by 2 seconds for every bolt. So if you wanted, you could just endlessly apply atonement to this target. Not endlessly, but pretty close. If you just want a single target heal as a tank, like a tank or something, but for some reason you're not casting Shadow Mend on them, it could be really good. It could actually make this talent viable, the Pentient. So I think that people with this legendary might see more play like that. And then you could switch between, oh, well, my atonement's about to fall off, so I'm going to hit this target real quick, you know. Really good play. Alright, so the last legendary I'd like to talk about is this one, which I find to be absolutely bonkers. First of all, let's take a look at the stats. The stats are Haste Mastery, which are... So the Mastery is just okay. I would say that Mastery is probably the weakest stat for Disc, even though it's not terrible, it's just one of the weakest. But the Haste on it is insane, like 1200 Haste. So we equip this, and just to give you kind of a more exploded version. Alright. So successfully applying a loss of control effect to an enemy grants you 70% increased movement speed and 15% haste for 10 seconds. This may occur every 30 seconds. So, first of all, I'd like to point out the dungeon potential. And in order to make this efficient, because it has to apply every 30 seconds, loss and control effect would be something like a fear, or a horrify, or something like that. So you basically have to use Psychic Scream. Psychic Scream is normally on a 30-second cooldown, or I'm sorry, a minute cooldown. So you'll actually have to spec out of Shining Voice Force, which is a really good cooldown, but Psychic Voice reduces the cooldown of Psychic Scream by 30 seconds. So basically your fear is now on a 30-second cooldown. And just to give you, like, this is insane. So I'm going to apply this on this, and I have the ring, right? Yep. So I'm going to fear this thing. And I just get this huge movement speed buff. Huge. For so long, right? And then I'll come back, and your haste is just insane. Alright, it's off for a second now. I have to wait a few seconds. But your haste? 15% haste buff for 10 seconds? I mean, Jesus. Let's say that you had Psychic Scream on cooldown. So that's basically a 15% divided by 3. 15 times 0.3333. So this is a flat 5% haste increase if you can keep Psychic Scream on cooldown. Which is, I don't know, it's just crazy. Like in, let's say, Mythic Dungeons, Mythic Plus Dungeons, you just constantly applying CC to targets, which helps anyway. And then you come back with like this massive haste increase. It's as good as your, well, I shouldn't say as good, but it's almost as good as your power infusion. So here we go. Let's fear, and then just like, dude, just like crazy cast times. Like my smite, remember how that ring reduced the cooldown on my smite by 15%? So this does that anyway. So this ring actually is, where'd it go? The same thing as this wrist, but it also applies to everything else. The only thing is you have to fear a target, which is really possible in PvP, really possible in dungeons. In raid, this can be limited. So I'm not. So it has to hit a target is the problem. So if you miss, it won't proc the ring. And if you, let's say a raid boss can't be feared, for example, or you're in a raid where there isn't little ads that come out that can be feared, this can have limited use. But for, I mean, raid bosses that do, it's just insane. You just fear them and then just blow the living shit out of it. Let's see if it, yeah, it's just crazy. Crazy that this haste buff is this long. And then you can use it as a getaway, or you can use it as a DPS healing increase. Yeah, I don't know. I put it top tier. I might change my mind if I find out that in raid there is virtually no bosses that have ads like that. But I doubt it. There's always some boss that does. But in dungeons, this thing is going to be so freaking overpowered. Absolutely ridiculous. Mythic Plus Dungeons, jeez, like, it serves as an AoE interrupt and a healing damage increase, movement speed to get out of mechanics. It's just crazy. Alright, well that's it for the Legendaries. These 9 are the disc-associated well, really 8, plus the little bonus material here. How do I think of them overall? Overall, I think they're pretty decent. There's none that are super outrageously broken that's just gonna just change the way the class plays. There's like little tweaks, like now you're gonna want to keep Psychic Scream on cooldown with this ring, or I don't know, like oh, this burst of healing with power word barrier. So there's like little quality of life stuff like that, but nothing like game breaking that you need the legendary to maximize the class. Yeah. And honestly, any legendary you get, it's going to be a blessing. So don't be hurt if any of them, you know, you're not getting any legendaries or... God, and once you're able to equip 2 of them, so in your garrison hall, let me show you this real quick before I end this video. In your garrison hall, there's a little dude over here. It's where you upgrade your class hall.
Yes.
The very last perk on this tree is increase the number of legendary items you can equip by 1. So right now there's a cap where you can only equip 1 legendary, but once you max out your order hall, you can equip 2. So some of these combos would be nuts. Would be pretty awesome. 2 slots at 895 early on is going to be awesome. I think that they're going to include more legendaries with each tier, which will be awesome. So look for that. But other than that, that's it for the Disc Priest legendaries. I'm not going to do a review on the other priests. People that know me, I only Disc Priest, so thanks for watching.